Bonjour. Bonjour à toutes et tous.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here again. Thank you for being with us today. And we're sorry about the delay because of our opening session, which was very interesting. So combining social justice and the green transition, that's our goal. Today, we have a great panel with people who are committed with their own goals, their own roadmap. And today they are going to tell us about what it means for them to combine environmental challenges and social challenges. To start, I would like us to listen to an experience from South Africa with Mrs. Makoma Lekalakala. She is the head of the Earth Life Association, and she can tell us about how much impact we can have as citizens, how people can change the situation and fight and win. So, Mrs. Makoma Lekalakala, please.
Thank you for that introduction and good morning. I didn't hear the part where you were introducing myself, but I just figured out that you are. Good morning, everyone. And I would like to thank the organizers to have invited me here. It's quite an important discussion that I don't think it only ends here, but would go beyond these rooms. The United Nations have actually declared that it is important that everyone enjoys the right to a healthy and sustainable development. And this is not just for the specific future, but we should all make it a reality. Can I have some water, please? Already there is evidence that people are experiencing the climate disruption. Thank you. We have seen our people experiencing climate change-induced natural disasters such as droughts, fires, flooding, and cyclones. These are all climate change-induced natural disasters. And though they don't just happen out of the blue, they happen because the climatic changes, and that climatic changes are caused by what the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change had said, that we should not go beyond using fossil fuels. So the extraction of fossil fuels are the cause of our biodiversity destruction, and this is not only just destroying the biodiversity, but this is also making people's cultures, traditions, and spiritual lives eroded. When you erode the biodiversity, you actually are eroding the people's being. We are living in a carbon bomb. And that carbon bomb is a carbon bomb that we see it cannot be stopped, or it's not being stopped. And this carbon bomb has caused displacements of people, has caused people's rights to be undermined. The right to a healthy environment is being undermined by this carbon bomb that we have been warned continuously not to do business as usual. The historic climate change agreement reached in this country in 2015 was at the backdrop of numerous intergovernmental panel on climate change reports that stated that we all need to act. And people hard hit by climate change have been calling for climate justice for decades. And that climate justice, it's what that has been acknowledged on the Paris Agreement, which emphasizes on a transition away from fossil fuel to a low carbon development, with all countries also indicating or submitting their nationally determined contribution to say this is what we'd be able to do as a way of us acting, as a way of us making sure that the planet, it's not destroyed. We cannot live, work, play in a dead planet. And that's what, in this city, in 2015, when the Paris Agreement was signed, this was the basis of which the agreement was signed. But the agreement was signed also to improve the health of Mother Earth towards a sustainable future. And that agreement talks about a transition away from fossil fuels, a transition away to a low carbon development. In South Africa, we have developed what we call a just transition framework. And that framework, just to quote from what the framework says, this framework has been developed by what is called the Presidential Climate Change Commission, a body that has been assigned or a body that has been created to advise the South African president on the just transition. Quoting from there, the framework, it says, a just transition contributes to the goals of a decent work for all, social inclusion, and eradication of poverty. For the transition to be realized, to be real, not greenwashed, it needs to be guided by people experiences. To ensure that the pathways to zero economies lead to greater social justice, I think that is the question that we're all asking ourselves as to what can be done. But it can be done, it's easier if we prioritize governance systems that we have to give effect to this transition. And justice to be at the core of addressing the historical power imbalances and structural inequalities, including gender inequality. But at the center, the justice factors should be on procedural justice, on restorative justice, distributive justice. And for us to be able to achieve all, that would mean each and every person from whatever corner needs to be involved, needs to be part of shaping the transition, because their experiences and the adaptive mode are the ones that would guide us as what needs to be done, so that that can actually be reflective of what people experiences and what people would yearn and want to see. Restorative justice, that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, because as long as we go business as usual, that would mean that degradation, disruption would continue. So restorative justice would mean we don't repeat. That means we stop extractive industries, or we gradually go towards stopping extractive industries, and we also make sure that there is distributive justice. Distributive justice is at the core of the just transition, because the system that we have today is that system that actually gives credence towards continuous perpetuation of exploitation and oppression. So if it's distributive justice, that means everyone would be catered for. We won't also be crying of hunger. But what actions should we do? For us, I think for now, it's important that we revolt against any system that we feel that the system perpetuates this disruptive climate that we find ourselves in. We have to be radical in our approach, do things differently, and not go do things as we are doing continuously every day. That would mean our governance system, we need to all be active citizens and make sure that the transition takes course and doesn't leave anyone behind. But what is important is that we need to build a harmonious coexistence of the planet and the people, because that's exactly what we're yearning for, to have a stable biodiversity, to also ensure that we're not part of degrading the environment further. So if we create a harmonious coexistence with the planet and the people, that would mean that everyone through procedural justice would be able to tackle some of the social ills that are interconnected with the ecological problem. So ecocide would be history to us. It won't be something that would be able to do. But people all over the world are doing practical things, particularly in ensuring that they own the means of creating energy, in actually making sure that we don't find ourselves repeating the mistakes of the past, that we're challenging. And I would say that ordinary people are the ones that are taking action every day through how they live. Thank you.
You can sit around us. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much for for what you said. And every year, we keep saying that there are new IPCC reports, 6 reports now that are increasingly alarming. As Mrs. Hidalgo said earlier, she gave us a warning. We are in a critical situation. And for example, the MEDEF, the French Employer Federation, declares something that is very worrying. In order to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, we have only 5 years left to act. So there is a climate issue, but we can't forget about poverty as well in human lives. Over 730 million people live under the poverty line at the moment. And what about the implications of this? I have 3 speakers with me today. Fabrice Bonifay, good morning. Thank you for being here again. You work for Bouygues. You're head of sustainable development, quality, security, and the environment. We also have Mrs. Agnès Crépé, who is in charge of software, longevity, and IT at Fairphone, and you will tell us more about that. And I am delighted as well to have Mr. Dan Laird, who is Deputy Mayor of Paris, in charge of the green transition, of the climate plan, water and energy, and you're also chairman of Eau de Paris, so the water management company of Paris. Fabrice Bonifay first. You talk about all of these issues publicly, and especially about the role of economic actors in the green transition. And you've published 2 papers, very honest papers, about these issues. So please, we would like to hear about your point of view. You have a career of 30 years at Bouygues. So what can you tell us? Do you think that economic actors realize how important their role is in this transition? Well, 370,000 French companies are involved or committed to the transition, and we have about 200 million companies around the world. So it means that it's only 0.0001% of companies that made a commitment. So it's not much. We know that commitments sometimes are empty. It depends on how honest and sincere people are, leaders are. So yes, we should be worried, because I believe that economic actors have not yet understood what it meant to decarbonize. We need more than just little actions. It's going to be easier for certain companies to proceed to the transition than for others. So we can't continue to do what we know is harmful. For example, when we talk about business models, how can we create value? Luckily, some companies are pioneers and they have understood what is happening. But we don't have much time left to turn the tide. So what can we do? How can we make sure that entrepreneurs no longer want to continue with harmful practices? How can they help people who don't have enough access decent living conditions? We are the problem. Emerging countries are not the problem. So we need to change our society model and not only our business models. And I think that few people are ready for that. Everybody is in favor of change, but against progress. Who took a plane to go on holiday this summer? Raise your hands so you can see. 15-20% of people still have not understood what was at stake. So there's a problem here. And do you think that you can advocate for that by setting the example? For example, not taking the plane anymore. Well, I don't know. You can always try to find an estimate and a percentage to measure your impact. Some people say that economic measures are more important, others that political decisions are more important. I don't know. I think that everybody can make a difference at their own level. So as a citizen, you can make your own difference. For example, when you spend money with your credit card, you can make a difference. You can decide to buy things you don't need or not. And if you work for a company, you can also make decisions to go in a certain direction. When you go to a business school, you learn certain things, but this is changing now. If we continue to overuse natural resources, it's not going to work. And then the political sphere, what can we do to influence those who still haven't understood or don't want to understand? So we're running out of time now. Our window of opportunity is getting smaller. For a long time, we thought that listening to scientific facts would be enough to make everybody realize the situation, but it's no longer enough. 27 COPs, 6 IPCC reports. We can't say that we don't know anymore. There are still so many obstacles that prevent us from making a change and ensuring that our children will have a future. We will have to resort to new methods now. So as part of C3D, my organization, we decided to look at the situation differently. We want to send a different message. There's nothing to lose anyway. Your conclusion is very clear. Some companies already have the right resources. You wrote a book about how to do business while being environmentally friendly. So you spoke about ways to speed up the transition. As I said, 0.0001% of companies made commitments and are really making a difference, are really implementing good measures. So we need to draw inspiration from them. They're not perfect, but they're better than all the other companies that haven't changed anything. So we need to use what they did to rely on their experience in order to create economic value without destroying the environment. And we would like that to become a model that can be replicated, to become a standard. So regenerative companies, distributive companies that will only work on essential business with business models that will not destroy resources. We want a new system that is not going to rely on exploiting the living component of our planet. So we need to keep manufacturing products, but we need them to be long-lasting, to last longer. The idea being always that these products are useful for people, that they meet primary needs. We need to focus on what is essential. And in countries such as ours, I feel like we still haven't understood about how important it is to protect the planet so that we can still live on this planet. If we want to show more solidarity with countries that still do not have access to all these rights, we need to make an effort. And it's not easy. It's going to have to come from leaders, of course. And unfortunately, we don't have these leaders yet. Yes, we need political decisions for that. A just transition, a social justice. We can't demand the same efforts from people in Paris, Marseille, Toulouse, or from people in South Africa, for example, or other countries. So aren't we hypocrites when we say that it's a collective responsibility, a shared responsibility? And this is going to be a good transition to listen to Agnès. We're not saying that we need to ask countries who still don't have enough to reduce their consumption. Again, it should come from us, from the billions of people who have a carbon footprint higher than 10, 20, 30 tons per year. We should be the ones reducing our carbon footprint. But let's be honest, emerging countries will never emerge. And they will never have the same lifestyle as Western countries have right now. It's never going to happen. But there is a difference between misery and excess and having access to water, for example. We have a moral obligation. So we need to do something about our economy so that these countries will have access to quality public services so that they can have decent lives. It's all about dignity. And if we give up on doing that, we're going to be selfish and irresponsible, and it's going to lead to war. I just wanted to add something to what you said about environmental measures. I can tell you about several examples about France, about Europe, about the digital sphere, for example. I work for a company that makes phones. 4% of greenhouse gases emission from the digital sector. And we have laws in France, European laws as well, about eco-design, for example. So smartphone manufacturers will have to make more long-lasting phones. So I feel like in France and in Europe, it's a good thing that we have these laws. Everything is interesting when we try to be more respectful of the environment. But I think that we also have to force companies to be more responsible, and that's what we're trying to do at the EU level. I know that there is a lot of lobbying against these laws, but we need to keep trying. Do you really believe in individual action, in the fact that we can protect dignity and social justice? And can you tell us more about the ideology behind Fairphone and about the link between the green transition and social justice? So Fairphone is a company that makes phones. We also make other products such as earphones. But Fairphone really is about creating a phone that is more responsible, more ethical, socially, but also environmentally. At the beginning, we weren't talking about a company or about a startup that pitched an idea. We're talking about a group of activists between the Congo and the Netherlands, trying to fight against armed conflicts linked to extractivism. And so at first, this initiative was a social initiative, so with the Congo and Amsterdam. And after 3 years of protests, of demonstrations, of petitions, a project was finally launched to have a phone, to create a phone that wasn't going to fuel armed conflicts in the Congo. And especially when extracting tungsten, for example. This project was a bit ambitious. At first, we had no engineers in this project. And that's probably why the project succeeded, actually. So people believed in the project, and now 10 years later, so the company was created in 2013, and now we have launched 5 generations of phones, which isn't that much. And what is special about Fairphone is that with these smartphones, we want to be respectful of the people who manufacture the phones. And we don't want this industry to be opaque anymore. We want to be respectful of people, and we want this phone to be more environmentally friendly. And we use Android. We want them to be long-lasting, so updates don't need to be done frequently, only 5 years, up to 10 years. Because it's a real problem right now. Smartphones have a life cycle of only 3 years. It's a real problem. Why shouldn't we force companies to keep their smartphones longer, for example, instead of changing them every 3 years? So it's all about the link between social and environmental issues. This project was started by activists, and we tackle social and environmental issues.
And you mentioned this project was undertaken by citizens, so it really shows the capacity of citizens to be involved in this type of projects. The question that I would like to ask you is the following. You are really at the intersection between social and economic approaches. So how do you manage to get more important actors to sustain your initiatives? One of the founders of our company say that if Fairphone no longer exists within 20 years, it's not a big problem if other companies are actually continuing this initiative. We sell around 5,000 phones a year, which is quite good, even if we are targeting 200,000, but we're not talking about millions of phones. So, as I said, we are very mindful of our supply chain, especially in terms of the minerals that are used. And also the weight of the minerals is important. But as you said, we need more actors and more stakeholders. Now, about the Cobalt Alliance initiative, we've got major stakeholders that have joined the initiative, such as Volvo. And you imagine that when Volvo decides to buy cobalt, we are talking about a different scale. So what we are really trying to do is to make sure that we will have other companies to join and embark on our project. And yes, we've got people who believe in our projects, and we do publish regularly the different and the various actors that have decided to join the initiative. And we make sure, and we are also assured that being more transparent about the integrity of the supply chain will make an impact. It's actually wonderful to see how such a small company has managed to impact the system and also to convince other companies. Thank you very much, Agnes. Dan Laird, we have heard people who explain to us about how being an activist and how advocacy are part of the energy transition. But obviously, the expectations are great when talking about French institutions and public services. So what does it mean to you to combine social justice and energy transition? And how do you translate these actions at the municipality of Paris? Maybe I'll start with a few words of introduction. René Dumont talked about the reality of climate change in Paris. Let me tell you that climate change in Paris has already happened. We are now expecting heat waves up to 50 degrees in the short term. So we know that our cities are vulnerable, and we know that heat waves lead to a higher rate of mortality. And we have also witnessed more people going to hospital because of that. And now I want to tell you more about the social reality behind this. Why is social justice at the heart of our strategy against climate change? Well, that's because we draw our inspiration on statistics. Children who live next to the motorway, the peripheric, are more vulnerable to asthma. Plus 25 kids are actually asthmatic if they live nearby the motorway. We also have other neighborhoods in Paris that are very vulnerable. So some people in the vulnerable neighborhood in Paris have been confronted to heat waves in their own houses. 70% of them have suffered from these heat waves in the last years. And the national number is only 50% in France. So it means that the urban population suffers more. Now, talking about sustainable and quality food. During the pandemic, we've seen the schools of Paris that were shut down, and we have seen kids that had no longer a hot meal because they were not going to school and they were not eating their lunch at school. So for us, combining social justice and climate change is a reality. We are going to adapt also our climate plan, and that enhances our strategy against climate change. It should be ratified by next autumn. We need to do within 10 years what has been done during the last 15 years. We've got only 10 years to go. So we are trying to speeding up this energy transition, and it is definitely linked to social justice. We cannot speed up the energy transition if we do not help the most vulnerable population who need more funding to renovate their houses. And we also need to do something for the people who do not have enough means to leave Paris during school holidays. They cannot afford mitigation measures, so we need public policy to help them, which is the reason why we need to have norms and also laws that can accompany this change. I represent Paris, but the most vulnerable Parisian people, well, we are not equal, and we do not have an equal access to these mitigation measures. So in this plan, we will try to help these populations. Thank you very much. You are actually talking about daily lives and daily issues for kids who have nothing to eat if the schools are closed. You're talking about people living next to the motorway, the peripheric. So can you tell us more about the actions that you are doing to be closer to the inhabitants? Because as you said, you've got only 10 years to go. Really. Well, to achieve these objectives, we need the mobilization of all stakeholders plus the population. When we're talking about the inhabitants, the carbon footprint of these vulnerable populations is very limited. They are the ones who contribute the least. So we are trying to link up the population with associations so that they can echo their problems. Let me give you one example from the Abbé Pierre Foundation, which is €0 to be paid for the person who needs to renovate their houses. This is something that has a big impact on the lives of people because of the heat waves. We also have associations that are trying to help. And we also have some Parisians who decide to use their time and to volunteer for association. So, for example, you've got inhabitants who decide to visit the elderly during heat waves to make sure that they are okay. So what's the best definition for resilient city? Well, it is solidarity, so that we can absorb shocks. We have distributed food, fruits, and vegetables to people who could not afford to buy food for their own children. You have seen the recent numbers that have been published by the famous association Restos du Cœur. So we work with the volunteers of Paris. We work with this solidarity spirit, which is embodied by the Parisian population. So this is actually what makes it possible to absorb the shock and to make Paris a resilient city. And the mayor of Paris also made the intersection that exists between social justice and democracy. Now, the mobilization of economic actors in Paris, the consumption of energy by public services is only 4% of the consumption in Paris. So making sure that we limit this consumption is at the core of our strategy. So we need to make sure that 96% consumption that is due to inhabitants and companies is reduced drastically. We need to make sure that they reduce their energy consumption. Another example, the use of AC, air conditioning, which is an absolute aberration when talking about climate change. And obviously, there is not an equal access to AC and air conditioning. We need to make sure that the companies in Paris stop using AC. And we need to make sure that the companies in Paris link up with Paris municipality and do not use their own solutions. So we need to make sure that we stop resorting to AC autonomously in companies. You all mentioned economic actors, companies, the power of citizens. Agnes, you said that you believe in the force of law. Dan Lert, can you please tell us more about the capacity of institutions and of the legal framework to make sure that they are binding texts, so that we make sure that social justice is heard and that the norms are respected? Can you please tell us more about it? You mentioned the different stakeholders that are responsible for the climate disruption. Paris has already invested more than $10 billion for the energy transition, but it means that 600 million euros have been used to renovate housings. So the municipality of Paris is making efforts but we need to have responsible the big companies, and here I want to mention Total Energy, that continue to invest in fossil energy. We know that Total Energy is the economic actor that pollutes the more in France, and they're actually at the heart of the polemics for their project in Uganda, in Tanzania, and maybe in South Africa as well. So we need to make sure that our strategy can also tackle these big economic actors. We know that floodings in Paris cost between 3 and 30 million euros, and same applies with heat waves. So we associated with New York municipalities and NGOs so that we can force Total Energy to comply with the Paris Accord. And Patrice Pouyanné, who is the CEO of Total, has also shown during the last MEDEF meeting that he has not understood what is at stake. So about the pipeline project that he wants to carry on, it's absolutely absurd and irreversible, which is the reason why we have decided to associate the municipality of Paris with New York against such projects, and we will use the legal framework to make sure that our case is carried forward, because we want the responsible of this climate disruption to be held accountable. Yes, to give you more context, Mr. Pouyanné, the CEO of Total, said it would be very difficult for Total to get out of this system, because otherwise it would impact the price of oil and therefore create more exclusion for the French citizens. So he said that we cannot make a difference between the private and the public interests. So let's see what will happen with distributive justice. Makoma, maybe a last word.
What you've just said now, it's music to my ears. Because we are in South Africa, in the eastern coast of South Africa, Total Energies wants to extract oil. And one thing that we've been saying is that it is important that the environmental and social safeguards before anything, any project could go ahead, should be considered, but also climate change and human rights. And if you challenging Total Energies from France, that is good enough. It shows that you have a responsible governance. Because from our side, what we're going to do, or what we're planning to do, is that should Shell wants to go ahead, we do have such progressive legislation in the country that says, I think Section 24 of the Bill of Rights says everyone has got a right to live in an environment that is not harmful to their being. And further on says everyone has got an obligation to protect that environment for the future generations. So if ever any inch of approval is given to Shell, we are holding our government responsible for that. And we're taking them to court. And this is what we've done with a number of projects that did lack, that consideration of what our constitution says, and also of the fact that we all have a right to live in a healthy and not harmful environment. So I really applaud you for that. And as we continue taking up Total Energies, I think we've also even went to the European Union Parliament raising all the issues, and I'm glad that we're having a backup from yourselves. That is where I wanted to make an intervention to say, we have such progressive legislation. For an example, South Africa has got what we call a gold status constitution. You can't fault it anyway. When you read or when you check, you see all the human rights, protection of human rights, protection of the environment is enshrined in the constitution. And we continuously remind politicians. And if politicians would not be reminded through our engagements, we normally use the courts to hold them accountable for the destruction of the environment and violation of people's rights. Thank you.
Merci, Makoma. Est-ce que vous avez peut-être chacune un dernier message ou un...
Maybe a last word about what's been said during this round table. What I can tell is that we can see the different levels, individual level, networks, lobbying, advocacy. There are many actions that are currently taken, and everybody has to be held accountable for their own actions. And again, I'm very happy to see your level of involvement in your respective industries. Maybe a last question. Do you sometimes feel that people are reluctant and that people need to be convinced? What's your take? Let me come back to what's been said by Anne Hidalgo this morning. The real danger to me is looming around the big companies that are taking up projects that endanger the environment. I participated in the setting up of the Sustainability Index that you can actually see when you buy electronic devices. The French government wanted to pass a bill about it and ask different companies to provide their insight. So in this context, I had to talk and discuss with different companies that were against such an approach. So what can we do against it? I believe that we have to reinforce our laws, plus we also need to make more alliances with Europe, surely, but also other countries. At the European level, some laws have been taken because I believe in eco-design. Maybe France, in a national level, can't do more, but at an international level, yes. Yes, just to echo what Agnès said, Anne Hidalgo has hosted the COP for the cities in Abidjan, and she enhanced the cooperation between the municipalities in the Global North and the Global South. We've mentioned Total Energy, which is one of the major actors about climate disruption. And when we are talking about the funding of Total, then we are mentioning the French banks, such as BNP Paribas, which is one of the major funders of such projects. So if we can carry on and carry forward these advocacy campaigns to make sure that these companies can fund the projects that are needed to set up mitigation measures, then that would be a good point, because we need to measure the loss. We need to measure what's at stake in terms of superficie, in terms of land, in terms of impact on the population. So these responsible need to pay for the consequences on their project. And this is what was at stake during this COP in Abidjan. So it's only through such a connection between stakes and municipalities that we will pave the way for a better future. And I was also very happy about I also enjoyed the fact that we could actually name the companies and the responsible. Makoma, maybe a last word from you?
Thank you. We all have a responsibility. You cannot pass the responsibility to the next person. We have to stand up, be courageous, do the right thing, so that that can be infectious. All of us can do the right thing. the planet can die, and if it dies, that means we also die. So I encourage all of you to take all the little actions, middle actions, and bigger actions, so that we can continuously protect our biodiversity and have a harmonious coexistence as people and nature. Thank you.
Merci. Merci à tous les trois. Ça a été un honneur d'accompagner vos échanges aujourd'hui.
Thank you very much for all your contributions, and I wish you a successful forum. Thank you.
Black woman. I want to create a beautiful world for you, black woman. Black woman. I want to create a beautiful world for you, black woman. A world of beauty for beautiful you. A world where black women can bathe. Black women. Naked and unashamed in gentle streams. A world where poetry is you, black woman. Bathing in gentle rhythmic waves. Black woman. Black woman. I want to create a beautiful world for you, black woman. I will create until I create that world for you.
It's a trip. It's got a funky beat, and I can bug out.
There are a lot of comments about who's blacker than you are, and who's blacker than she is, blacker than thou. Blacker than thou. Blacker than thou. Blacker than thou. There are a lot of comments about who's blacker than you are, who's blacker than she is, blacker than thou. Blacker than thou. There are a lot of comments about who's blacker than you are, who's blacker than she is, blacker than thou. Blacker than thou. blacker than thou.
Woo! A grand groove, grand groove. Catch the beat. Well, good evening, everybody. So glad you're here. All the people in the front, the people in the rear. When you came to the door, you was expecting to see grand groove rock the ceremony. Well, I'm the capital T, as intact. I got the double E, which follows in the back. I'm the S, the K, and the I. I'm the lady romancer. I'm the cool fly guy. I'm the lady chaser. I'm the rhyme creator. When I say it, dead fry, Frank, you never hear one greater like a hip hop, a little hip hop, or dap. I listen to me T-ski while I rock the spot. I catch the beat. I catch the beat. It's the B-B-E-E-A-A-T-T-T-T. It's your body. I catch the beat. It's the B-B-E-E-A-A-T-T-T-T-T-T-T-T in your mind and your body. I catch the beat. I'm so sweet.